Friends and fans of Mr. Shahaney, we have come together today to pay our homage to the memory of a great person and to salute an outstanding leader who for more than 4 decades guided the growth and development of Ashok Leyland, the first 2 decades as managing director, and then thereafter as chairman of the board and as chairman emeritus. I've had this unique privilege of working with him very closely, almost through the entire period. In every respect, Mr. Shahaney was a pioneer. We followed in the path that he cut in front of us. We stood on his shoulders to look at the road ahead. And this journey, therefore, has been extremely instructive and extremely educational to all of us who have followed his footsteps. There's something very unique about Mr. Shahaney as a professional manager. He started his career in a public sector undertaking in Jessups. He spent almost a couple of decades there. And thereafter, he moved to Ashok Leyland, which was then a subsidiary of British Leyland, and spent a decade in a blue-blooded British MNC. And that was followed by a period with the Hinduja Group, an Indian family-owned group. And all the cultures were very different. It is a tribute to his resilience and his sagacity to have been able to imbibe the best features of each of this cultural tradition. The financial discipline, accountability from the public sector undertaking, the focus on technology and the customer orientation from the MNCs, and the audacious enterprise from the Hinduja Group. And it is his legacy that the synthesis of these has been left behind as an enduring cultural flag for Ashok Leyland. In the later years, Mr. Shahaney became a very respected, a very important leader in the Hinduja Group, donning several caps, performing several roles. And we are today fortunate to have Mr. G.P. Hinduja, chairman of the Hinduja Group, and Mr. Dheeraj Hinduja, chairman of Ashok Leyland, to share their reminiscences about this great man.
Dear friends and Parivar of Ashok Leyland, today is the Remembrance Day of our dear Ram Shahaney, who will never be forgotten for what he has done in Ashok Leyland. The real foundation was created by him. He was responsible to convince me and my brothers to acquire Ashok Leyland. I have seen many professionals, but he was from the most selected, and nowadays you find very rare such quality of people. He was a real workaholic. He had a full command on the company. He knew each and everything. Although he was an engineer, but even on the management, he had a full command. His picture is always in my mind with his white shirt, grey pant, and beaming smile. Ram was always available 24/7. He worked. He was in real love with his work, and even in 1984, when he got married with Sunita, his love was not divided into two. He also loved Sunita and equally Ashok Leyland. I can only say that Ram was a unique person with commitment to work, honest, and high integrity, and he was also very careful in dealing with people. He was highly respected in the government. He was well accepted in all the organizations. I have yet to find somebody of his caliber. I can only pray to God to keep his soul in peace, and also I would want Sunita to God give her strength to bear the irreparable loss, because she was totally devoted to him, and I know how she must be feeling now without him. But the only thing in the world is the certainty is the death. So each one of us has to leave this world. But people who leave with good service, what they have done in the world for the society, for the growth of economy, will always be remembered, and Ram is one of them. So friends, let us say Hari Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, Hari Om Namo Narayana. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to remember Mr. Ram Shahaney. I had the pleasure of knowing him for over 30 years and worked closely with him for 20 years. He was, of course, a visionary, and from my early days at Ashok Leyland, I was able to observe him very closely. I sat in on many meetings, whether it was on production planning, engineering, finance, strategy, and I was amazed the level of detailing that he went into and his sharp memory. He remembered each and everything that was discussed in previous meetings and was very clear about the actions that he wanted implemented. Today, the foundation of Ashok Leyland was really set by him. Through the technological alliances with ZF, Hino, the expansion that he did in Alvar, Hosur, Pandara, these were all the footprints that we needed to make a successful company as we see it today. Although he had a very hard exterior, which many people witnessed, for myself and my wife Shahaney, we were very fortunate to spend a lot of time with him and Mrs. Shahaney when we came to Chennai immediately after our marriage. He ensured that he made us very welcome, introduced us to many people of our own age, and made it comfortable for us to feel at home. We also had the privilege of seeing him many times during his holidays in London. The one distinction which will never leave my mind is his attitude for work. Even when he was in London, he used to come to our offices and used to spend all his time in the office, and he called that his holiday. And of course, all of you know his habit of leaving the office very late, carrying his numerous briefcases, and making sure all his paperwork was done as well. He was someone we admired a lot. I personally learned a lot from him, and I'm sure just like we miss him today, all of you will miss him as well. My wife Shahaney joins me in conveying our condolences to Mrs. Shahaney and to the rest of his family, and we pray for his soul to be at rest.
The Sondi family has had a very long relationship with both Mr. Shahaney and Ashok Leyland. Not only was Vipin Sondhi's uncle, Mr. Raghunandan Saran, was the very founder of Ashok Leyland. His father, the illustrious and most respected Mr. Mantosh Sondhi, was the chairman of Ashok Leyland for some years and was a key mentor for Mr. Ram Shahaney. It's very appropriate, therefore, that Vipin shares his memories of Mr. Shahaney with us.
Namaste, friends. Mr. Shahaney will be remembered as an exemplary technocrat, a role model admired by all of us across generations, in the industry, whether in Ashok Leyland or elsewhere. Mr. Shahaney was a perfectionist in every sense of the word. Unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity of working closely with him. However, today when I have the privilege of working in Ashok Leyland, I'm experiencing at every turn the strong foundation that he had laid in technology, manufacturing, and people. It is truly fascinating that he could envision the future and get the organization prepared for it over 40 years ago. He was passionate about Ashok Leyland and kept in touch with the developments till the very end. Within a week of my appointment at Ashok Leyland, my wife and I called on Mr. and Mrs. Shahaney at their impeccably appointed home. Over the course of a very pleasant evening, he spoke vividly at length about the Ashok Leyland journey. However, after COVID struck, we were not able to meet, but would speak telephonically every 2 or 3 weeks. The conversation always centered around commercial vehicles in general, and of course Ashok Leyland in particular. How was the market? What were the trends in technology? And how were people coping with COVID? Only a few weeks ago, perhaps a week before he was hospitalized, he asked me, when are we going to the factory? I promised him that we would post-COVID, as he must be careful. Sadly, I could not fulfill his wish. Our family has had a close relationship with Mr. Shahaney's family for many decades now, and therefore, in my early years, dining table conversations centered around nation building and Ashok Leyland's proud role led by Mr. Shahaney within it. I am positive he will be our guiding spirit in our endeavors as we march forward in Ashok Leyland into a new world. While all of us are deeply saddened at his passing away, I would also like us to take a moment to celebrate the glorious and eventful life he has led. Our biggest tribute to him will be to follow his deep commitment and strong work ethic. On behalf of all past and present colleagues of Ashok Leyland and my own family, I extend my sincere and heartfelt condolences to Mrs. Shahaney, the children, nephews and nieces, many of whom I have known over the years, for the irreparable loss. May the Almighty give the Shahaney family all strength. Om Shanti.
Mr. Shahaney had the audacity to dream and dream big. At the time that he joined Ashok Leyland, the license capacity of the company for manufactured vehicles was 12,500 per year. We were actually punished if he produced more. And yet, Mr. Shahaney saw that the growth in the economic conditions in the country and the demand for commercial vehicles will increase manifold, and therefore he dreamt big. And that increase that he dreamt about was not in percentage terms. He wanted to more than triple the capacity from 12,500 vehicles per year all the way to 40,000 vehicles per year in one stroke. And it required a license to be given by the government of India, and they laid two conditions. One condition was that British Leyland had to reduce their shareholding in the company from 74% to not more than 51%. And this is not a very easy condition to fulfill because British Leyland was facing a lot of headwinds those days, and Ashok Leyland was perhaps the only one which was making super profits within the British Leyland group. And it was not very easy to get them to agree to dilute their shareholding in this company. The other condition was that we had to implement this capacity increase in backward areas, and it meant going to really backward areas like Hosur, which is very backward at that point of time, to Bandara in Maharashtra and Dalbar in Rajasthan. The challenges that Mr. Shahaney confronted at that point of time and the way he managed each of this is an object lesson. Anyone else would have felt it so daunting, so impossible that they would not have dared to take up this enterprise. But it was his courage and his conviction that the country needed this and the company had the potential to grow that made him take up this very audacious dream for implementation. Working with him at that point of time and working closely with him, the lessons that I learned are far superior to any lessons that I would have ever learned in any business school anywhere in the world. While we were disengaging with British Leyland, Mr. Shahaney also made sure that we were able to leverage the access that British Leyland had across the various geographies to develop Ashok Leyland's own footprint in terms of export markets. This gave us several opportunities, not merely in places like Africa, but also in neighboring countries like Sri Lanka. Lanka Leyland is one of his legacies, which has flourished in different market conditions with different kind of policy framework in Sri Lanka. And the brand that Ashok Leyland has built in that island is something which is entirely a contribution of Mr. Shahaney. Mr. Nigel Penn, who was formerly a director on the Ashok Leyland board representing British Leyland, and was privy to the challenges that Mr. Shahaney was facing at that point of time, is happily with us. And I request Nigel to share his memories and his experiences during those times.
Donald Stokes, later Lord Stokes, had set up Ashok Leyland in the 1950s, principally to facilitate the export of vehicles from the UK to India. Over the years, the business evolved to become a self-contained manufacturing operation and had remained essentially a subsidiary of the Leyland Motor Corporation. In the 1970s, the then managing director, Ron Hancock, recognised the need to move Ashok Leyland forward, and in 1978 recruited Ram Shahaney from Jessops to be the next and the first Indian managing director. Ram proved to be an inspirational leader and a very astute negotiator. Ram had huge intellect. He quickly recognised the position the company was in, with a majority foreign shareholding, but he found ways to expand and modernise the business despite all the constraints. At this stage, Leyland was not in a position to put more money into the company, but Ram was able to convince them to reduce their shareholding, and he found ways to raise funding in order to move the company forward. I first met Ram at this time when I was working in Africa. Ashok Leyland was being urged by the Indian government to expand its export sales. There was a natural resistance from Leyland, who were fighting the unions and being pushed by the UK government to retain jobs in the UK factories. Working with Ram and his colleagues at the time, we were able to secure some very valuable contracts in Africa and to convince the Leyland UK people that they were all incremental business. For me, working with Ram and his staff was a breath of fresh air, and we soon became friends as well as business colleagues. During this time, Ram was very successful in earning the respect and friendship of all the people from the UK who were involved with Ashok Leyland. Such was the respect for Ram that he was invited to join the board of Leyland Vehicles, then the commercial vehicle arm of British Leyland. In 1987, when Mrs. Thatcher had ordered the winding up of British Leyland, I was on the board of Ashok Leyland, and we had been told to find a buyer for the BL holding in Ashok. Naturally, Ram was very much involved with this, and we leaned heavily on his advice. Our brief was to find a buyer who would ensure a good and prosperous future for the company. I like to think that we were successful in putting it into safe hands. After I left BL, my wife Sue and I retained our friendship with Ram and Sunita, and we would meet up whenever they made one of their regular trips to London. Ram set a fine example both in business and in life, and I had huge respect for him. He will be sadly missed, but I shall retain plenty of fond memories of the time we spent together.
One of the strong cultural traditions that Mr. Shahaney nurtured in the company was to treat the dealerships of Ashok Leyland as if they were a part of the family, part of the extended family. Like any family, we quarreled, we made up, but we were there for each other when there was a need. The fact that many dealerships in Ashok Leyland have been with the company for several decades, in fact, some of them from the very inception of the company, is an eloquent testimony of the success of this model of relationship. We have with us today Mr. Bharat Sanghvi, Chairman of Automotive Manufacturers, who had very long relationship with the company in many ways. Mr. R. Dinesh from TVS Group, who's also had many different kind of relationship with the company. We have Mr. K.H. Shah from Rajesh Motors and Mr. Sharad Kedia from Shri Automotive to share their experiences, their wonderful memories of Mr. Shahaney and Ashok Leyland in his days.
Mr. Shahaney, Mr. Ram Shahaney, who was always, he had the reputation of being a very tough taskmaster, but my experience with him was very, very pleasant. I first met him, I remember the date, it was 18th April in the year in which he joined, which I believe was 1978. But when I saw him, I realized that he is not only going to make changes in the working of Ashok Leyland, but he is also going to make all of us work hard. I have two experiences of his which I would like to quote in dealing with our dealership after he took over as the managing director. In the first case, he had come to Mumbai to meet the general manager of BST after we received a large order of vehicles from them. We met the general manager, who was very kind and very happy that Mr. Shahaney flew in all the way from Chennai to Mumbai to thank him for the order. Jokingly, he asked Mr. Shahaney whether he can still consider any discount on the vehicles which they have ordered. So Shahaney smiled and he turned around and looked at my father. Both my father and I were with him at that meeting. He asked my father, says, "What will you contribute if I give any discount?" So my father said, "It's left to you. Whatever you decide would be acceptable to me." He went back turned around to the general manager and he said, "Sir, we already have the order. Don't talk about discount." And we all had a big laugh. So everybody always thought that he was a very serious man. But I had always found him to be very jovial, cracking jokes at times, and whilst talking to me, always smiling. We all know that he had done wonders in Ashok Leyland after he took over. And I would like to read what my father had written about him in his memoir. I quote, he said, "The real breakthrough in the career of Ashok Leyland came after Ram Shahaney took over as its first Indian managing director. With huge investment and expansion, modernization and technology upgradation in tune with India's industrial development, Ashok Leyland under Ram underwent a remarkable transformation with a product mix that had hardly any parallel in the annals of Indian commercial vehicle industry. The decade 1980 saw a big quantum jump in the company's production. In this, my father has also mentioned that in his path-breaking initiative and innovations, Ram was fortunate to have persons like R. Jagannath and R. Seshasai, who I can be proud of their record of service with Ashok Leyland. This was mentioned by him in his memoir. We had the privilege of Mr. Shahaney inaugurating 3 of our new branches in Maharashtra at Nagpur, Aurangabad, and Navi Mumbai. I was very sorry to hear about his demise suddenly when I got the message, and I will always cherish my association with him, my relations with him, our company's relations with him, and the amount of guidance which he gave me to improve the working of our organization, be it vehicle sales, spare parts, or service. And I was very fortunate to have guidance from such a knowledgeable, such a strict, and such a wonderful person. Thank you.
I joined TVS and Sons as a young trainee, and my first exposure to Ashok Leyland was to learn how to repair vehicles, etc. Then in 1991, I came to Chennai, and the then executive director said that I should have a courtesy call with Mr. Shahaney. Everybody was in awe of him. So I was very worried, a young person who's just joined the business, 3 years in the business, coming to meet the managing director of Ashok Leyland. And obviously, when I went into the room, I didn't know what to say initially. But then it was a wonderful meeting because he made me feel at ease. He did not make me feel that I was an youngster coming in front of him. He got up from his chair, came in and said, young man, very nice to meet you. And then he spoke about the relationship between TVS and Ashok Leyland. And that was my first introduction to him. Very soon, as we were starting to expand our business into other parts of India, because we were a South-based dealer initially, then I started interacting with him more. I used to go to him for getting his approval and blessings whenever we were expanding into northern part of India. And he used to be what I would call very open to listening to what we had as issues. But at the same time, he was very firm on what his expectations from the dealerships were. I would call that as a relationship which I think went beyond just being a manufacturer-dealer relationship. I think it meant a lot to me personally to have got his approval and his blessings as I started in my career in the vehicle dealership business. And he, as the managing director of Ashok Leyland, was kind of instrumental in allowing us to expand the relationship even more and become an integral part, even though we had been dealing with Ashok Leyland over many years. But I think that period for us, at least for me, was a golden period dealing with Mr. Shahaney as well. The second major interaction I would say I had with him was when we had a mega event or a mega launch in Namakkal. And at that time, it was like, more than 6,000 customers were got together. Mr. Shahaney actually came down by train from Chennai. And as he came in, we had a huge reception, and we were very surprised that he was able to interact with almost literally reach out to the entire customer base. That was for me my first interaction with him, with customers. And that was when he actually launched a new model which was dedicated to Namakkal. And I had a wonderful opportunity to spend more than 4 or 5 hours with him because we were driving together, meeting people. And I learned a lot from him on how he perceived the customer relationship and the dealer relationship. And that for me was when I got to know him more personally, if I can use that word, because it was a one-on-one time spent with him. And finally, we saw him off at the station, and I was quite surprised at how humble and simple natured he was, because without any fanfare, without anything, he just got out of the train and he said bye and he left. And all of us kind of walked back thinking how he's a personification of maybe the perfect temperament in terms of how you can have the best and also be open to interacting with the lowest level salesman, with the customer everywhere in full harmony. Mr. Shahaney not only was my mentor, but somebody who meant a lot to me. I only wish that his soul rests in peace, that Sunita, who has been a great companion to him and whom I have also had interactions with, have good memories of him. And I look forward to following in his footsteps and the culture he has set for us to follow.
My first interaction with Shahaney Saab happened when the Alwar plant was conceived by Ashok Leyland. Mr. R.V. Shah was amply motivated by him to play an effective role in execution with his relationship and contracts in Rajasthan. As a youngster, I used to admire the military-like precision, speed, and efficiency with which this project was implemented under the leadership of Shahaney Saab. To be honest, some of his personality traits like punctuality, discipline, organizational capabilities, systematic approach, etc. had greatly influenced my young mind and helped in self-development. Really, I don't know how to express heartfelt gratitude to him now. He always had a soft corner for Rajesh Motors and extended his help and support in all possible ways in different times. Whatever Rajesh Motors is today, it would not be wrong to say that major credit for the same goes to Shahaney Saab. Shah family will always remain grateful to him, and we are confident that our organization will always benefit from his blessings from heaven. We dealer partners always used to look forward to annual dealers conference, particularly the family conference. Families used to come back with the feelings as if we are the major partners and Ashok Leyland a minor partner. Possibly this culture, which was nurtured by him, has helped our relationship to grow stronger over years and kept us together. We had lots of fun during the family conferences in which both Mrs. Sudhita Shahaney and Shahaney Saab used to be actively participants, and that made all the difference. We pray to the Almighty for his soul to rest in peace and give enough strength to the family members to withstand this loss.
The minds of Mr. Sani is a great loss to Ashok family. Along with all others, I also feel the loss. My interaction with him as a leader was from 1984. I found him as a dynamic and a firm decision maker. I still remember that in West Bengal, whenever we used to go to any corporate company or government department for marketing of Ashok Leyland vehicles, they used to ask, "How is Mr. Sani?" which showed that he used to command respect and love from all corners. He was a managing director whom dealers, while afraid, loved and respected him by heart. He always treated all dealers as a family member and not as just a channel partner. He always used to boost our morale by putting a lot of confidence and belief in us. Once again, my sincere condolence. Om Shanti.
Nothing excited Mr. Shahaney more than technology. The series of steps that he took to upgrade technology in Ashok Leyland, such as the collaboration for engine technology with Hino Motors of Japan, the relationship and the collaboration that we had with ZF of Germany for transmission technology, the cab and chassis systems from Leyland vehicles, which was then called Cargo, now called E-Comet. All these technology upgradations that he undertook those days not only survive today, but they are contributing to the very success of the company today. And we must be eternally grateful for these path-breaking initiatives that he took at that point of time. He was not only keen on technology upgradation within Ashok Leyland, he was equally keen that as a prior community also came up to speed in terms of upgrading their own products. We have with us Mr. Baba Kalyani, Chairman of Bharat Forge, a company that has had very long, very durable, and very successful association with Ashok Leyland for over many decades, sharing with us his experience of having worked under the leadership of Mr. Shahaney.
It's with a sense of deep gratitude and respect that I am here talking about my and our company's association with the late Sri Ram Shahaney. My association with Mr. Ram Shahaney goes back to 1978, when at the height of the license permit Raj, he took over as Managing Director of Ashok Leyland. As British Leyland was then the majority shareholder of the company, Ashok Leyland was a foreign company that was subject to strict regulations and control. One of Mr. Shahaney's first decisions was to expand Ashok Leyland's manufacturing capacity to 40,000 vehicles. Since British Leyland was not wanting to invest in the expansion program, he used innovative strategies to raise resources, as a result of which the parent company's holding got diluted. Ashok Leyland then became an Indian company. Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat may be buzzwords today, but Mr. Shahaney boldly announced his vision for the company and perhaps for the Indian manufacturing industry as long back as over 4 decades ago. Though he was a professional manager, I always considered Mr. Shahaney to be a great entrepreneur. He had the foresight to develop and encourage a strong domestic supply chain. He was one of the early champions of indigenization and import substitution. Many companies, including Bharat Forge, benefited from his vision. Rather than being mere suppliers, he made us partners in the growth and development of his company. A significant measure of Bharat Forge's success is due to the encouragement and guidance that we received from him. I recollect Mr. Shahaney having visited Bharat Forge in the 1980s. In keeping with those times, our manufacturing operations were largely labor-intensive, with less emphasis on technology. When he went around our plant, he perhaps sensed our potential to absorb, adapt, and use modern technologies. Since then, he always encouraged us to continuously invest in modernizing and technologically upgrading our operations to achieve world-class product quality. During these years, our partnership with Ashok Leyland has grown to become inherently strong and durable. In the early 1980s, Bharat Forge was considering setting up a joint venture with Rockwell International Corporation of the United States to manufacture rear axle assemblies and aggregates, including brakes, for commercial vehicles in India. It was a product that was far ahead of its times. Mr. Shahaney, though, encouraged my father and me to go ahead with the project and assured us of Ashok Leyland's full support. We were the single source for this high technology item for Ashok Leyland, and the company was our only customer. True to his word, Mr. Shahaney wholeheartedly backed the project, helped us to nurture it through difficult times, till it eventually became profitable. Automotive Axles Limited is one of the leading manufacturers in the country and is a showpiece of a successful Indo-US business cooperation. In many ways, Mr. Shahaney was a mentor, friend, philosopher, and a guide to Bharat Force, and to me personally. From business associates, we became close family friends. It is a relationship that the Kalyani family will always value and treasure. Mr. Shahaney has left a deep imprint on us, which I am confident will guide us for years to come. Our thoughts and prayers are with Mrs. Shahaney and the family during these difficult times. May his soul rest in eternal peace.
Behind the tough exterior, Mr. Shahaney had a very kind heart. His heart beat for the well-being of every employee of the company, whether it was a senior manager or an executive or an associate in the shop floor. And he was fair and just in what he did, which is the reason why even when people got punished, they felt that it is a fair punishment. In dealing with the trade unions over the several decades that he was the leader of the company, he displayed a fair attitude towards their demands. And that endeared him to the entire worker community, the associate community in Ashok Leyland. We will listen to Mr. Kuchelar and Mr. Michael Fernandez, veteran trade union leaders who had very long association with Ashok Leyland and who are a part of the history of the company.
Mr. R.J. Shahaney joined Ashok Leyland as the first Indian managing director in the year 1978. I was then elected president of Ashok Leyland Employees Union. When I was first introduced to him, I was greatly impressed by his pleasant and flamboyant personality with a smile in his face. He spoke only a few words, but meaningfully, instilling confidence in me that he would maintain cordial relationship initiated by Mr. Hancock and enriched by Mr. Wordsworth, his European predecessors. He was a visionary architect. Shahaney joined the company. The Janata Dal regime started dismantling the license Raj. Mr. Shahaney promptly responded by expanding the Ennur plant and started new units at Hosur, Tamil Nadu, Bandara, Maharashtra, and Alwar, Rajasthan. He has also started a unit in Sri Lanka, thereby making Ashok Leyland a multinational. He brought the updated technology from west and east, thereby making the vehicles sturdy one and with the Uno engine a smart and fuel efficient one. Thus, Ashok Leyland vehicles became brand insistent, which sustained the company till this day. He steered the company diligently even during the recessionary period, and thereby not even a year passed without profit. He mentored many managers. He was known for creation of permanent jobs during tenure of office. He raised 300 permanent workforce into 12,000 permanent workforce. He distributed the income equitably to all the stakeholders, namely shareholders, employees, and suppliers. He made the jobs decent one and paid decent salary with which the workers' standard of living was raised appreciably. He maintained very good business relations with the union and the workmen. Thereby, everyone in the region quoted him as a model employer. He built 2 schools, one at Ennur and another at Hosur, to give standard education to the wards of employees as well as the children in the region. He readily agreed with me to start a community development scheme funded by the contribution made by the workmen from the monthly salary and from the company. From these funds, more than 100 schools and community halls were housed in the backward areas around the plants. He was a legendary professional, leaving a rich legacy of ethical management to be nurtured forever. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
I am very happy to participate in this memorial service for Shri R.J. Shahaney. I came to know him personally in 1989 while trying to reach a waste settlement, what is called the LTS. The major issue at that time was to decide the fate of Sunday work, Monday being the weekly off. As a result of that, the 22 Sundays, 22 days in a month got 30 days DA, as against earlier it was for 26 days the DA was applicable. 30 days was applicable for 26 days. Then the overtime problem was there relating to the 3 years beyond the 45 hours. They were getting single payment. We demanded for double payment, but it was finally settled at 1.25 thanks to Mr. Shahaney. The next year was the next waste settlement was in 1993 January, I think, and the level of the package was improved thanks to again Mr. Shahaney, but this time not face to face but over the phone. There's one incident which I must recall at this point of time, and that is that George, my brother, who was Industries Minister from 1977 June to 1979 June, and on one occasion they met each other at the Chennai airport, and Mr. Shahaney said to George that he wanted some of his time to discuss some problems. George asked him where he was going. He said he was going to Delhi, and George said he was going to Calcutta. So you cancel your ticket to Delhi, come along with me to Calcutta, and on the flight of 2.5 hours, we will discuss all your problems, which they did. And one of the very happy outcome of that meeting was discussion, whatever the time they spent together was, that George said you can expand. There will be no question of license Raj and all that, but only one condition, and that is you should locate your new expansion units in economically backward areas for the benefit of the people living elsewhere and have no chance of jobs and so on. So that was done, and that has resulted in units coming up in Hosur, in Bandara, in Alwar, and I regard that as a good thing that happened to Ashok Leyland. Also thanks to Mr. Shahaney and George together.
Mr. Shahaney was a tough taskmaster. In fact, a very tough taskmaster. I can recall that in the 30-odd years that I'd worked with him, there were exactly 3 occasions when he complimented me for good work. But we all knew that his silent support was there when we had done a good job. And therefore we gave our best, because we looked up to him since he was a role model for all of us. He was a perfectionist, and he demanded what he himself gave to the company. And that's what made him an extraordinary leader. Let's listen to V.R. Papu, who was his colleague in Jessup's and then subsequently joined Ashok Leyland as Executive Director Marketing, and to Jagannath, a veteran Ashok Leyland person who retired as Deputy Managing Director.
My association with Mr. Shahaney began several decades ago when in 1962 I joined Jessup and Company Limited, Kolkata. Mr. Shahaney was by then a manager and considered a rising star destined to occupy the top positions of the company. I have so many wonderful memories of him. It is difficult to express these and highlight what a dynamic personality he was. A brilliant engineer, visionary, perfectionist, bold in introducing new products, with a keen eye for design and detail, motivating staff and workers, he led from the front, achieving seemingly impossible goals, and with an amazing photographic memory, he reminded us of tasks that we had forgotten or not completed. From initially setting up a factory for building electric multiple coaches for the Mumbai suburban rail system, he introduced new products rapidly, which including special purpose cranes, road making machinery, long wall coal mining systems, aerial ropeways, and the like. His final contribution was to introduce the technically complex challenging in making paper machinery. Mr. Shahaney enjoyed the trust, respect, and confidence of staff and workers, labor leaders, clients in India and abroad, and bureaucrats. Lacking ostentation, he kept away from the spotlight and yet reached out with compassion and support for all work-related or personal issues. On a visit to Bokaro Steel Plant, to the shock of accompanying officials, he took his jacket off and started climbing an unfinished vertical ladder nearly 100 feet and walked fearlessly down a narrow half-built walkway. And we, of course, had to follow with our hearts in our mouth. Joining Leyland's marketing division in '85 gave me another opportunity to work under him. Amongst many other new projects he undertook here was the successful development of a military logistic vehicle, the Stallion, and its induction into the Indian Army, testimony to his patience and perseverance. Later joining him the newly set up Ashok Leyland Project Services, his talent to conceptualize and implement complicated projects, be it in power, oil, gas, petrochemicals, ports, information technology, to name a few, was mind-boggling. In his passing, the country has lost an engineer par excellence, a compassionate human being, and to me personally, a great friend.
The passing away of Mr. R.J. Shahaney has left an immense void. What a man he was. When he joined Ashok Leyland in the late 1970s, we were all apprehensive. We had gotten used to British managing directors. He was an outsider from our point of view, and we expected a complete overhaul in the company. His not knowing the culture of the company, we feared the worst. We expected him to bring with him his own team that would result in a disruption in the top management. But RJS, as he came to be known after that, did the very opposite. Surprisingly, he continued with the same top management for the next 2 to 3 years. Only after he had got a handle on the way things were being run in Ashok Leyland did he attempt to bring in organizational changes. He was not a disruptor, as the modern saying goes. A man of meticulous habits, he was fastidious and expected perfection from everyone. He was jokingly referred to as the last Englishman left in India. He was a man of few words, with his clipped speech, stiff upper lip, and a forbidding image. All this was only a put-on, as beneath this hard exterior, he was soft in the core. A very humane person and magnanimous in his approach to human problems. I do not recall any instance of his sacking an executive for incompetence. he would tolerate this failing and just transfer the concerned person to a less onerous assignment. Universally acknowledged was his great capacity for hard work. When he joined AL, he was still a bachelor and he used to work 12 to 14 hours a day. After his marriage, he reduced this to 10 to 12 hours. He expected everyone to work hard. Likewise, he firmly believed in the adage that hard work did not kill anybody. For him, Ashok Leyland came first before anything else and wanted the same commitment from his top management. He rarely availed of his annual leave entitlement. As a result, I think he had accumulated 3 to 4 years of privileged leave at the time he formally relinquished executive responsibilities in the company. I still remember the time he was understudying the then managing director. For days, no one saw him as he was locked away in his room, poring through all the documents and files, and he never made an appearance outside his room. Many feared his quick temper and trembled before approaching him in his office. This show of intemperance never lasted. It was over in a flash, all would be forgotten. He never nursed any grievance. That was the man. To me, he was a father figure and mentor. I worked closely with him for 25 years. He guided me, often lambasted me, but always encouraged me. How can I ever forget his correction of my drafts? I would have thought that I had produced the best draft, and lo and behold, I would find many corrections in his green or red pentel ink pen. His obsession with perfection in everything stood out. At times this was frustrating, but helped us immensely in the long run. May his soul rest in peace, and may God produce more such men.
Mr. Shahaney's leadership and influence went far beyond Ashok Leyland. He was the president of the Association of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, as it used to be called then. It is now called Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, and later as the president of AIEI, which was later transformed into CII. In all these public offices that he held, there's one thing remarkable that I noticed. Mr. Shahaney would never hesitate to take up an issue, quite often an issue for advocacy with the government of India on behalf of the industry, even if that meant a certain inconvenience or discomfort to Ashok Leyland, because he was representing the industry, and it was his task and it was his dharma to put across what is good for the industry as a whole. And this was not a place for canvassing for the particular interest of the company that he led. Let's hear Tarun Das, a master institution builder, the former Director General of the CII, who built CII, talk about another great institution builder.
A 57-year-old association, that's what I've had, 1963 to 2020, with Mr. Ram Shahaney. And all through, I have always called him Mr. Shahaney. I never took the liberty of calling him Ram. I got to know him when he was in Jessup in Calcutta, on my very first day in office in 1963. And that relationship continued. In 1977, still at Jessup's, he was managing director. He was invited to become the vice president of AIEI, the predecessor body of CII. He accepted, but later in the year, he decided at a personal level to make the big transition from the public sector to the private sector, from Calcutta to Chennai, from Jessup to Leyland. And the first thing he did, because he knew that we had this regional rotation of presidents, he sent in his resignation because he had been elected from the East and he knew that he would be wrong to continue with this from the South. The board of AIEI rejected his resignation because they said that while regional rotation is important, it's more important to have a president of quality. So Mr. Ram Shahaney became president from Chennai in his very first year with Leyland in 1977-78. He was a very different president. He knew the government working very well, having been in the public sector. And we actually learnt at his feet. And he was unique in many ways. Low profile, understated, publicity shy, clear and concise, man of few words, direct to the point, a slight smile sometimes with a little bit of sense of humor which came out, a very private person. He was the one president who decided that at the AGM which he was presiding over, there would be no ministers, there would be no government people, only the members of AII. His report back to the membership, and that's it. It was typical Mr. Ram Shahaney, very businesslike. 10 years later, he continued with his association very deeply. He said that AII must have a base in London. And he arranged a meeting with the Director General of the Confederation of British Industry. I accompanied him. And he negotiated that an unprecedented arrangement would happen where CBI of UK would provide office space to CII in their headquarters in London. And that arrangement continues till this day. And that led to our profile in UK rising sharply. And when John Major, the Prime Minister, came to India in 1993 as chief guest at the Republic Day Parade and launched the Indo-British Partnership, CII was selected as the Indian partner, and Jamshed Irani of Tata Steel was the co-chair for this huge initiative which brought the Concorde, the QE2 ship and so many other things to India. His commitment to CII continued till the very end, and particularly his caring for the staff and their welfare. So we lose a unique person, but he will live on in our memories forever.
Mr. Shahaney was a long-time bachelor, and finally he decided to get married when he was in his 50s. Sunita came into his life like a breeze. There was a tremendous transformation in the man after his marriage with Sunita. Both perfectionists in their own way, they were really made for each other. On behalf of Ashok Leyland and the Hinduja Group, I would like to convey our heartfelt condolences to Mrs. Sunita Shahaney and her lovely family for the great loss and bereavement.
Good evening. I am Sunita Shahaney. Since I am the last speaker this evening, I've had this chance to listen to all of you. The tributes, the accolades, the outpouring of respect and love from so many around the world, people whose lives he touched, people he taught and walked with, that my heart is full of pride for this man who is my beloved husband, and he meant so much to all those who worked with him, his seniors, his colleagues and his juniors, his family members and his children in the family. Not only have you learnt from him, but I have too. Just watching him and understanding what he did, the way he did it and why. He gave me the freedom to express myself. He gave me the space to be myself and the space to follow my dreams. Whenever he counseled me, it was with gentle authority and affectionate persuasion. He always said, if we are together, there is nothing that we cannot achieve. He was the heartbeat of our family, the legend from Leyland, a man of a million kindnesses, a perfect son and brother, and a father figure to the children and grandchildren in our family. For me, personally, he was a wonderful husband, companion, and my best friend. Being an avid photographer, his camera captured unforgettable moments in his life with his family, friends, and colleagues, and those around him have captured their unforgettable images of him from the cameras of their mind. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our doctors at Apollo Hospital, especially Dr. Sai Satish, who went way beyond the call of duty and accompanied him on his last journey, as I could not be there due to my being ill. I would like to thank Dr. Arun Selvam, Dr. Ramasubramaniam, and the attendants who took care of him during his last days. My sincere and heartfelt thanks to Gopi Hinduja, Dheeraj Hinduja, Vipin Sondi, and Mr. R. Seshasai, who we all call Sesh, and all those in Ashok Leyland who stood by us and continue to do so during this painful time. May God bless you all. I would also like to thank the two main people who have put this program together for you, Mr. Rajesh Mani and Sulakshana. They have worked endless hours, day and night, in spite of ill health, and brought this program out for you. Thank you, Rajesh and Sulakshana. He has transcended to another realm, having lived a full and good life, a life of service to all, a life full of love for his family. We had a good life together, and therefore it really is a life that needs to be celebrated, though I miss him terribly. I will end with the couplet from the Guru Granth Sahib. Suraj kiran mile, jal ka jal hua ram, jyoti jyot rali, sampuran thya ram. The rays of light merge with the sun, water merges with water. The light of the soul blends with the universal light and becomes a part of it. Vaheguru.
On behalf of all of you, I want to thank every one of the speakers today who shared their lovely memories with a great man, and we lift our ears with him, basking in his glory, remembering all his great achievements. We at Ashok Leyland, both the present and the past associates of Ashok Leyland, stand tall and proud, stand together and salute the great person, salute the great leader who led us for over 4 decades to a very successful journey. We salute the person, the like of whom God does not make anymore. Thank you.